So this is the Danube River where the story takes place, hundreds of miles up. If we were to get on a boat, we would end up in that kind of country. It's sunset right now. And directly behind me is this fuck-off piece of beautiful architecture that you will see nowhere else in the world, which is the Parliament building. I thought to myself, what could I review that takes place in Hungary? And what could I review that takes place on the Danube River? Since I'm staying right next to it, for absurdly cheap, by the way. Everything is incredibly cheap here in Hungary. It's so beautiful, it's like what Paris should be, and is not. The Willows by Algernon Blackwood takes place on the Danube River, and it's one of the greatest horror stories that is responsible for like the entire. It was like the catalyst for the entire canon of horror literature that we are all modern horror writers are indebted to, essentially, because it was the short story that H.P. Lovecraft called the greatest supernatural story in English literature. Racing along at 12 kilometers an hour soon took us well into Hungary, and the muddy waters, sure sign of flood, sent us aground on many a shingle bed, and twisted us like a cork in many sudden belching whirlpool before the towers of Pressburg showed against the sky. And then the canoe, leaping like a spirited horse, flew at top speed under the gray walls, negotiated safely the sunken chain of the Flagenbruck ferry, turned the corner sharply to the left, and plunged on yellow foam into the wilderness of islands, sandbanks, and swampland beyond, the land of the Willows. No place worth knowing yields itself at sight, and those the least inviting, on first view, may leave the most haunting pictures upon the walls of memory. Budapest is actually quite the opposite of that phrase from our author today, who is Algernon Blackwood. It's actually a very inviting, warm and open city, very quiet, very peaceful, nothing short of stunning in its architecture, very interesting history. Kind of rough right now, especially for young people. There's a severe lack of jobs, and all of them have to leave despite many of them speaking multiple languages and being overly educated. It's the same story with Spain and France. Everybody has no money, but can do like everything. So essentially, it's a lot of the beauty is sort of this. It's not quite a lie, but a lot of it's sort of for tourism. Even so, it's still a gorgeous city. I was going to review Satan Tango by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I can't speak Hungarian. I have no point of reference. It's actually great that people speak English here in Hungary, because there's nothing for me to pick up on at all. There's no way to get around it, so I really wanted to enjoy Satan Tango, but it started to kind of feel like like Bellatar's 7-hour adaptation, like very, very slow, and I wasn't sure what the payoff was going to be, or if there was going to be one. So about 250 pages in, I decided, well, okay, what else can I review that actually takes place in Hungary, or takes place on or near the Danube? And sure enough, I remembered one of my favorite horror short stories of all time, which is Algernon Blackwood's The Willows. So essentially, modern horror literature is indebted to H.P. Lovecraft, and H.P. Lovecraft is indebted to Algernon Blackwood, who was a British author who wrote a short story in 1907 called The Willows. It's only about 50 pages long. And Algernon Blackwood was a guy who was kind of like colloquially referred to as the Ghost Man, because he had this radio show, and he was on television, and he was associated mostly with ghost stories. And it was sort of the very beginning of supernatural or weird fiction before that was even a thing. And this particular story, The Willows, influenced Lovecraft so much that he called it like the greatest supernatural story in English literature. It takes place in the middle of nowhere, kind of like almost like a swamp area. It's a story about two guys canoeing down this river, which snakes throughout Europe. And They're canoeing down this river, and it sort of starts off in the, kind of like Deliverance on the Danube kind of tone, going through these small towns and stopping and doing what they do. And, Algernon Blackwood actually was sort of a gregarious guy. He sort of like was an outdoorsy fellow who was like, skiing or hiking or doing what you do. But he was a loner, although not quite to the degree that Lovecraft was. He definitely didn't appear to be a misanthrope. Actually, interestingly enough, Blackwood was sort of, he sort of comes off as like an optimist, as opposed to Lovecraft, who was absolutely 100% a pessimist and has influenced all this pessimistic philosophy and literature. But anyways, back to the story. So they're canoeing down this river. They've entered this part of the river where there's willows surrounding them on both sides. They're camped out in the middle of the river on these sand islands. And something feels completely off. They were warned by the small, the townspeople, of course. And as it goes in these kind of stories. And you never quite know, ducks, what's wrong. You never quite understand who the enemy is. It's this completely nondescript entity, and that's why the story, of course, is so effective and so frightening. Blackwood is like a pleasure to read because his writing is very, very simple. It's almost like pedantically British. It's like there's nothing complicated about it, but the ideas that he's trying to discuss or ask questions about are the most complicated. He's asking about he's discussing this unfathomable, impossible horror. Yet what I felt of dread was no ordinary ghostly fear. It was infinitely greater, stranger, and seemed to arise from some dim, ancestral sense of terror more profoundly disturbing than anything I had known or dreamed of. We had strayed, as the Swede put it, into some region or some set of conditions where the risks were great, yet unintelligible to us. Where the frontiers of some unknown world lay close about us, it was a spot held by the dwellers in some outer space, a sort of peephole whence they could spy upon the earth, themselves unseen, a point where the veil between had worn a little thin. As the final result of too long a sojourn here, we should be carried over the border and deprived of what we called our lives, yet by mental, not physical processes. In that sense, as he said, we should be the victims of our adventure, a sacrifice. The conceptually ungraspable, these two men have wandered in by accident to this either a fourth dimension or hell or just God's mistake or something, some area that should not exist. And how do you simply describe that, right? It's very easy to complicate things, but how do you concisely and effectively elicit that feeling in the reader? And Blackwood does it in spades. He's got it. He's taken the complex fear of the unknown and distilled it into perfected literary dread. It's magnificent. So unlike many ghost story patterns, this sort of like, there's this point of no return for the Willows where, these characters have no idea what's going on. You have no idea what's going on, and it's basically anybody's guess. There's this small pocket of this alien space where man is an intruder. It's like where the old gods from ancient Europe are still kind of operating. The trees start to take on these really frightening shapes, and then they move seemingly at their own will when you're not looking. And then there's this gong noise that echoes out through all of the earth that these two men keep hearing, kind of like this buzzing, creeping, insectual, like it's... My descriptions of it don't even really do it justice. You have to sit in a dark room with one lamp and read it at night, and you'll get it. All the great cliches are there too, so much so that you wouldn't even recognize them because they're so good. Algernon Blackwood was basically the guy who was starting these cliches. So you have, they're looking out as they're cooking their evening stew. It's dark and they're camped out on the island in the middle of the river, and they see this flat boat a couple 100 feet away in the fog of this guy going by, and he's like trying to shout something at them and warn them, and then he crosses himself and he just continues on. and shapes floating in the water that look like dead bodies, and it's great. I mean, it's a fucking great short story, because Blackwood understood that there's nothing scarier than the fact that we don't know. We don't know anything. So if you like Poe, if you like Bierce, if you like Southern Gothic fiction, if you like, even like Cormac McCarthy and stuff, anything that really like takes place in the outdoors with these descriptions of vast, non-caring, kind of bleak, atmospheric landscapes, then this is definitely for you. And it goes, like I said, it's very well written, very British, just goes quickly. Great read. It's 50 pages, it's easy, it's a legendary impetus for, the canon of 20th century horror literature, So, yeah, check it out. And come visit Budapest. I mean, I've been to a lot of cities, and this is one of the few that is just immediately kind of seduced me from the get-go. It's stunning in every single way. The food is great, it's cheap, the lodging is cheap. You can stay here for like a week for like a couple $100. Easy, no problem. And you can eat amazing, amazing Hungarian street food. And you know how Europe is, you just travel. Oh, is that a sign? Uh-oh. Maybe I better shut the fuck up and get out of here. The ducks know. Quick, what's that floating in the water? Oh, it's just some ducks. Maybe. An explanation of some kind was an absolute necessity, just as some working explanation of the universe is necessary, however absurd, to the happiness of every individual who seeks to do his duty in the world and face the problems of life. All my life, he said, I have been strangely, vividly conscious of another region, not far removed from our own world in one sense, yet wholly different in kind, where great things go on unceasingly, where immense and terrible personalities hurry by, intent on vast purposes, compared to which earthly affairs, the rise and fall of nations, the destinies of empires, the fate of armies and continents, are all as dust in the balance. Life is too short to read bullshit. Don't canoe down the Danube. All right, talk to you guys soon. Have a great day. Ciao.